everyone, welcome back to the channel. So this week I'm going to show you another very easy special effect to do. Again, it's on the basic side, but it can look really effective if you're doing it just for fun, or maybe it's, I know we've passed Halloween, but it could be some sort of fancy dress, or it could be an effect that you're going for something in particular. So this is a really simple, basic raised scar. And what you need for a raised scar is your liquid latex, some water. It's good to have a bit of tissue or an old towel. This is just a bit of kitchen roll, and that's going to be just to wipe your brush as you go. I'm going to need one brush for the latex, one brush for your concealer, and some sort of concealer palette, or it could be body paints, face paints, could even be eyeshadows, anything that will give the tones that you want for that particular scar. And I'll show you how surprisingly easy it is to do a simple raised scar. So as with any special effects, the more you practice, the better they'll become. You can also do a lot of research on Google Images. You can search for so many videos now that can be very useful. Be aware though, there's a few things when you're looking at the images. Be careful what you type, because sometimes you can see images and they are either not what you're looking for, or they can be so graphic that you wish you hadn't seen them. So if you're typing in scars, just be aware that sometimes you see special effects scars and they can be really good for copy and good for inspiration. Sometimes you're looking for a real scar to copy, but occasionally when you're looking at scar images, if you type it in, you can see some really realistic things that make you go, ugh, that's not good. So even though that is what you were looking for and it is a real scar, just be aware that sometimes you can see some very graphic injuries, so always proceed with caution there. Having said that, you do want to look for something realistic. And the other things that you have to bear in mind, liquid latex, you can get latex allergies. So if you're not sure if you're allergic to it, do a patch test. As we always say, patch test either the area or the usual areas that you patch test for sensitivity. The most sensitive areas are the crook of the elbow and behind the ear. Those are the two areas that are very sensitive. So if you're going to react, you will probably react within 24 hours. Usually a reaction occurs almost immediately. If you're super sensitive, give it 48 hours. Again, with the liquid latex, you have to remember that it is liquid, it can stain. So if you can get into the habit of putting the lid back on when you're not using it, the chances of knocking it over are minimal. You also need to remember that if you drop it on clothing, it can stain. I would recommend, again, just Google some tips on how to get it out. I can't say it would definitely work, but maybe once it dries, picking it off. And then because it breaks down with oils, maybe try a little bit of oil, even if it's just olive oil from the kitchen, but proceed cautiously because it depends on the fabric that you've spilled it on. So just do some research there again if you spill it, but the goal is to not spill it. The other thing to remember is that liquid latex can be sensitive to extremes of temperature. So this is liquid, that's what we want. But if it's kept in an extremely hot or extremely cold environment, it can change how it behaves. So make sure that you keep it in cool room temperature conditions, or if the room is particularly hot, just read the instructions for that particular brand and make sure you keep it in the directions of that particular brand's recommendations, or you might go to use it and it might have solidified, or it might be lumpy, it might not do what you need it to do. Almost there, there's a lot of things that you have to remember with this. Okay, latex does actually solidify, that's the point of it. It's liquid until it dries. Once it dries, that's it. So when you're using your brush, you're using it in liquid form. If you allow it to dry on the brush, that's the brush basically wrecked. I'm sure there would be methods to try and break it down, but that's why we've got the water here, so that when we use the brush in the liquid latex, we give it a rinse in the water so that it never becomes solidified with solid latex. So don't use your absolutely favourite, expensive, nobody can touch it, it's gold dust brush. Use a brush that is fit for purpose, it's effective, but don't use one that you would be absolutely devastated if something happened to it. Now, this is one of my older brushes. I actually really like this. It's a Body Shop brush and it's years old. And this is a Grimace brush from my original kit when I was training, and that's old too. This is going to be for the concealer. I don't always subscribe to a concealer brush has to come from the concealer collection and a lip brush has to come from the lip collection. There's a lot to be said for finding a brush in the shape that works for you and just using that shape for that job. It's also great to go to the art store if you're looking for a particular brush. Art stores can be excellent because you'll get all different shapes, sizes, widths, materials. They tend to be cheaper, and it also means that you can build up a kit more economically, and it's specifically customized to you. So I still love all the brands that we use the brushes from, don't get me wrong. However, there's a lot to be said for customizing your kit and going down the art store route, or just going into individual shops and seeing little unique brushes in different shapes that don't necessarily come in kits, and thinking, okay, that brush would be ideal for that job. So I think that's everything. I'll talk to you about the concealers when it's time for that part, but I'm now going to show you a really simple raised scar. So we have our lid off of our latex, and we're going to be very careful. Now what you could do is actually take some of the latex out and put it into either a palette that you want to work with or a little bowl, but because I'm only using this on myself, I'm going to dip in. If I was using it on someone else, I probably would decant it, but remember, when you decant it, the drying process is going to start. So bear with me just now, because you wouldn't normally do this, but I'm just doing this for us today. So I'm going to sketch out my scar, and what I want to do is I want to build up a raised element to it so that when the latex dries, it does look quite raised. And what I also want to do is thin it down at the edges. So I'm now dipping my brush in the water so that I'm not going to get solid latex starting to hard on it. I'm drying it off, but I want to soften that edge, because in reality, a scar wouldn't be too perfect. So I'm just allowing those edges just to thin out. And remember, you're going to be building these layers. So that's just my scar. Again, I've used a little bit of latex on that brush, so I'm going to dry it off. Now, you can use a hairdryer on this, and this will speed up the process. And you'll know when it's starting to dry, when it starts to go from white to clear. Now, depending on your skin tone, it might look completely clear, or it might still have a little hint of the white to it, but that's when your concealer comes in. So you do have to have some patience for this, because you are building it up. And again, I must remind you that this is just a really basic scar. This isn't me showing you what they do on television or film, or even in theatre. This is just, you're doing a very simple scar because you're creating a look for a costume, a fancy dress, Halloween. That's all this is. We're not going to add any blood. We're not going to add any depth to it in the sense that we're trying to trick you. It's not about that. It's just an easy scar for something that you might be going to an event that requires an element of authenticity to your costume. That's really what we're going for. And can you see that we're starting to get some dryness here? So what I'll do, so that I don't bore you and you fall asleep, is we're going to come back to this. It's only going to take about a minute or two. We're going to come back to it when you see it start to dry, and I'll show you what we do next. So this is us 2 minutes in. So this is now dried clear. This is clear. Now this was the thicker part of the latex, so this is where it's taking a little bit longer to dry. Remember, you can speed this up with a hairdryer, but I want to do it in real time in case you don't have access to a hairdryer or you don't want to use one for it. Now, if you move whatever area it is, depending on the effect you're going for, if you crease the skin and you actually apply the latex when it's creased, then when you relax it, you'll get a tightening and a pulling effect as it dries. So that can add to an effect that you might want to go for. Also, I don't know if you can see, they can see that it's 3D. You might be able to, you might not, but it's raised here. So when you look at a scar, sometimes you might not see, it might look flat, and you do get the flat scars, but then sometimes you've got a raised scar. You can get keloid scarring as well, where it's quite uneven. It can be a bumpy and lumpy texture. You get the redness there. So it all depends on the effect you're going for, and you can do all of these scars differently, different techniques, if you do your research for it. So this is practically dry. So what you could do is add another layer to it. So again, you would decant this. I'm just doing this for us today. So you could add more depth to it, more texture. You could even thicken bits, or you could just run over it and just purely build it up. So you could keep building it as much as you wanted, and again, just get into the habit of running that brush into your water and drying it off. And what I'll do is I'll put my lid on just now. It's such a good habit just to get into the lid. I nearly did that. It wouldn't actually matter too much if I do that. But if it was your client that was there, you wouldn't want them moving in case you ruin the effect of the latex. If you're trying to get a very neat line and somebody moves the area, you don't want that. So I'm just smoothing out these edges, dipping my brush again, drying it off. And because this is building layer number 2, there's going to be a bit more depth to this. So again, I don't know if you can see, but it's definitely raised from the skin. And it's thinner, and then we've got a more raised section here, and then it peters out and it blends into the skin at the edge there. So we'll come back to this in a moment. This will take about another 2 minutes. When you next see it, it'll be dry, and that's when we can start adding a little bit of definition with our concealer palette. So this is it dry. If I touch it, you can see that it's completely dry now. The only way that I could really take it off is to lift the edge and peel it. I can do that at the end and let you see. But can you see there now, we don't have any colour on this, we don't have any concealer, we've not added any effect, but it's got that basis, it's 3D basically. So hopefully it looks real enough on the skin. It's got that shine that's the giveaway that there's latex there. But again, you can powder that down, you can concealer over it. But if you didn't know, once we've got the concealer on, you might think that that's an old raised scar and you might question, oh, what did you do? How did that happen? So now I'm going to show you how you could actually add some depth to it, add some concealer, get rid of that sign of the latex, the shininess, and make that look like, oh, you've got a scar, get an old raised scar. So now we're ready to add some colour to it. So this is my HD concealer palette. When I'm working on set or I'm working with clients, these are pro concealers that are HD, so they're high definition, meaning that they don't show up in an artificial way when you're filming. They're also good because they can be foundations, so you can use them as foundations, mix them, you can also use them as concealers, you can powder them down. They're really multifunctional, and they're just very, very handy when you're trying to blend to get to a specific colour or again add definition. Now there's actually a mirror on this side, but I don't want to give you irritating reflection, so I've popped some kitchen roll there, but the kitchen roll will also be handy because as I'm mixing, sometimes you would mix on the back of your hand, but what I could do if I use a colour and it's not quite right, I can actually use it on the kitchen roll and I can dry off the brush and I can get rid of any excess. So basically it's there so I don't annoy you with a mirror reflection, but it's also quite handy too. So what I would do, I'm just testing out the colour and blending it in. So there's a surprise, I'm the lightest colour. Surprise, surprise. So what I could do, first of all, is just completely colour in the scar. To match my skin tone. And if you think about it, there are some scars that are so old and so faded that they do actually just match the same colour of the skin. They're blended in. And again, I am using the brush in this concealer, but for health and safety and no cross-contamination, you can actually take some on the back, scrape it out with the back of your brush onto whichever area. It could be, you might be using a palette to blend, you might be using the back of your hand to blend, so I'll do that there. So we can just take our time and work over this and just see if we can get it to match into the skin. And again, it's all about blending it out. And if I've got too much on here, I can take some off. And I'm just going to move my hand just to see. Now this isn't an authentic setting where you would be working on someone. So I've got the lights here and I'm not taking as long as I would do normally if it was something where I'd be working to a brief. but we're just getting a little effect there. So I don't know if you can see how raised it looks there. I'll show you at the end if I can. Now what we could possibly do is maybe add a little bit of depth to it. So I could go maybe 4 colours down. See how we're looking there. And what I could do is take this darker colour and just run along the edge. Blend it out. Blend everything out to the sides. So I'm just adding a little shadow, almost like a contour. And you know that when you contour, you're pushing something into the background, and when you highlight, you're pulling it forward. So what I'm basically doing with the contour is I'm trying to draw attention to the edge of the scar by making the edge look darker. And then the lighter colour almost becomes the highlight. And I don't have any red here, but what I could do if I wanted was actually, you could run a little bit of red over the side and make it look as if it's still quite, it wouldn't be fresh, but still almost like a damaged area of skin. But just by running that little bit of contour over the side, you've drawn attention to how raised it is. And just giving it a focal point. But then you could keep moving on with it. You could add lots more depth and lots more highlight and just really, because remember, you're trying to make it look authentic if you want, but if you're doing something for a look, or you're doing, again, fancy dress, Halloween, anything like that, you can really start to ramp it up and you can make it extreme. And you can really go to town on it and you can make it look extra fake. But that's just an idea of how you could do a raised scar. So I hope you found that useful. And if you're finished and you want to take it off, all you do is lift up the side and peel it away. And that's it. And you might be left with an area where you can actually see where you lifted the latex from and the makeup's still all around it. But it can be quite a good look. It can be quick and effective, and it can be a great way just to add a special effect to any fancy dress, any costume that you're going for. Hope you found that useful. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.